not going to focus too much. This presentation today, I'm not going to focus too much on the science. So I'm going to be giving a talk next Monday where I will talk about the most interesting results of using this model. And today I'm mostly interested in explaining how to use the models and maybe how you could incorporate the models in this year's projects workshop or also in other projects that you may have in the future. So just an outline of my talk. I'm going to briefly talk about the motivation behind this work, and then I'll go directly and describe this VOneNet architecture. And then most of the time will be spent on how to use the VOneNet. So I'll show you how you can use a pre-trained model for object classification, or how you can train a new model, and then how you can just use the front end of the model, that is this neural network implementation of a primary visual cortex, and how you can configure this VOne model and eventually use it for your own projects. So I think that the VOneNet and this project in general falls in this field of neuromorphic engineering. So and my research, although I tend to not think of too much in to use the terms neuromorphing to describe the work that I do, but I do use engineering applications to study neuroscience, and then I also use what we know about how the brain works and neural circuits to inspire or constrain new engineering tools. And in this case, I'm going to be talking how we can use what we know about the neurobiology of the primary visual cortex, which is the first area in the cortex that receives visual information, and how we can use this to improve current models of computer vision. So artificial neural networks, ANNs, so they are currently the state of the art in solving many different types of computer vision tasks, in particularly object recognition. But they still do not, they still have many limitations when compared to humans. So particularly ANNs can be fooled by very small imperceptible perturbations, which are known as adversarial attacks. So if you see the image on the left, which is a picture of my cat, if we can now introduce some very small perturbations that are basically imperceptible to the human eye when overlaid to the same picture of a cat, you and I will continue saying that now this picture is still of a cat, but models trained on ImageNet will be fooled by this new picture. And in particular, for example, one model here would say that now this picture contains a sleeping bag. So this is a very crucial limitation of ANNs. And in addition, when we introduce now just random noise, but noise from different types of distribution, so either Gaussian noise, shot noise, impulse noise, or when we corrupt the image using other types of perturbations, such as blur, some weather effects or digital effects, while we still perceive that picture as containing a cat, most models that are trained in computer vision tasks, they fail to generalize for this type of perturbations. So this tells us that although these models are very good, they still have many limitations when compared to human vision. And we wondered whether we could develop ANNs that could robustly generalize like human brains. And so we started developing this architecture, the VOneNet, and we had some interesting, sorry, someone said something? Okay, so we had some evidence that from the space of many neural networks, those that better approximated the primary visual cortex at their early stages were also more robust. So I'm going to be presenting those results in detail Monday. And so inspired by that, we basically implemented a VOne model in front of a standard neural network. And we call this architecture the VOneNet. So the VOneNet was developed with the following goal. So it has a fixed VOne front end, which we call the VOne block. The VOne block contains a Gabor filter bank. So this is a convolutional layer, but the kernels of the filters are all defined by the Gabor function. And it's followed by a nonlinear function. And we have two different types of cells, just like in primary visual cortex. There are simple cells and complex cells. Complex cells are phase invariant. Simple cells have a very strong phase modulation. And then finally, we have a VOne internal neuronal noise generator, which we simulate Poisson noise that we add to the model activations. And so what is interesting about this model and is different from most ANNs is that by design, it is already brain mapped. We know that there are some units in the model that they are simple cells with a certain type of spatial frequency selectivity, certain type of orientation selectivity. And so this is very interesting because we can now use the model not only for computer visual tasks, but also as a model of visual processing in the brain. And additionally, this was designed completely in a modular framework, so we can adapt this VOne block to basically any convolutional neural network architecture. And just to give you a brief overview of how we constrain the convolutional layer, this Gabor filter bank by neuronal data. So we use different studies from this very vast literature on VOne neurophysiology, where over the last decades, neuroscientists have characterized responses of single VOne neurons to different types of stimuli. And so we use the spatial properties of the neuron's receptive field to constrain the parameters in our Gabor filter bank. So you could say that our Gabor filter bank is an instantiation of one putative V1. So it would be it's a subject that would have a V1, and our V1 block attempts to emulate that. So a whole primary visual cortex of an individual. Of course, it is limited by architecture. We cannot have. There's only so many channels we can include in the model. In our current model, we use 512 channels. There are many discussions of how many different channels or cell types there are in V1, but usually they're considered to be more than this 512. So maybe we're not sampling as densely all the different channel types as we have in a human brain, but still we sample the space of the parameters that we think that either a human or a macaque brain neurons in V1 represent. So, and this is the last part of the motivation, because I told you that our goal was to develop models that were more robust. Here I'm showing ResNet 50, which is a very commonly used neural network for object recognition for trained on ImageNet. And here I'm showing the gray bar represents the accuracy under a very weak white box attack. The dashed line is the performance without any attack, so the clean performance. So you can see that this model, the performance is less than 50% under a very, very low perturbation strength. And now when we compare with the same ResNet 50 architecture, but replacing the first convolutional layer by our V1 block, we see that our model has a considerably higher accuracy under this type of attacks. And these gains, they generalize for other architectures. Here I'm showing for the CorNet-S, which is another architecture that was developed by colleagues in the lab. And here AlexNet, very popular neural network used for object recognition. When we increase the perturbation strength of these attacks, and now standard models, they have an accuracy almost at zero. We now see that the VOneNets are also affected by the attack, but they are considerably have a considerably higher accuracy than the standard models. So I'll be talking about these results and more in the talk Monday. Today, I would like to focus on how you can use this VOneNet architecture. So all the code that's been released is open source. You can find it in the GitHub repo. I have the link here. And so to install it, you just need to go to the command line, recommend that you use in a Conde environment or something like that, and you just install the VOneNet, and then all the code will be under site packages. And so with this, you'll have the code to create this VOne block, and it's in a configurable way, so we'll be able to change parameters of the VOne block. And this implementation is all done in PyTorch, and it was implemented as a torch.nm.module, which is a class that has several functionality to interface with other types of modules in PyTorch. So there are also model weights for different pre-trained models. So these are ANN architectures, different types of backend architectures that have been trained already with the VOne block in front. And these are some of the models that we have available. And there's also functionality to evaluate and train these models on ImageNet. And we're currently working to adapt this to CFAR and NIST datasets. So I will not spend much time here, but if you just want to evaluate a pre-trained model, you can just go to the command line and run something like this. You could either run this on GPU or CPU only. Here I have the code to run a VOne ResNet 50 model on CPU. You just need to replace here this ImageNet path by your local directory where you contain the validation images of ImageNet. You can check, the run.py for other options that you can use when evaluating a model. And similarly, if you want to train a model from scratch, there's also functionality for that. And again, I advise you that you check the train.py for other arguments to pass to this function. But I think that for most of you, at least here in this workshop, you will be using the VOne block in conjunction with another model for this reinforcement learning agent, and maybe not necessarily training it on ImageNet. If you want, you can use already the pre-trained models that we provide, but so that you know how the VOne block, the code is implemented. Basically, you can use just the VOne block as a standalone. So it's designed, it's implemented as an a torch.nm.module. So you can use just the VOne block if you want, and you can add it to other components in PyTorch, or you can just use it to pre-process image, then save your images, or convert and then use with a model that is not even written in PyTorch, can be completely different framework. Or you can use the whole VOneNet, so that it's also implemented as a module. So depending on your project, you may work with both of these options. And in terms of architecture, there are many parameters that you can set, and everything that you set on the VOne block, you don't need to train, because the VOne block is by design fixed. So you set the parameters and you get one VOne block, and then you can use that as a fixed set of features that you can use in your projects. So in terms of architectural parameters, the very important parameters that you have is the visual degrees, and this represents what's the size of the input of the model in spatial visual degrees. So we know that, for example, in the fovea of humans, where we tend to identify objects, we tend to use only between 8 to 10 degrees. However, if we're looking at a much larger scene, the input size can be much larger. The models that we pre-train, we use a visual degree of 8 degrees, because that's where typically the range where we think object recognition phenomena is happening. The image size is just the resolution of the image in pixels. The models that we have used in the past have 254 by 224 pixels, but again, you can change this. The stride is after the image passes through the set of VOne features. Let's say you start with an RGB image that has 224 by 224 by 3 pixels. If you set a stride of 1, you produce a spatial map that is also 224 by 224, but maybe you don't need this because the receptacles are quite big. So in our models, we use a stride of 4, and that results in a spatial map of 56 by 56. And then the model arch is the architectural backend. If you want to add it after the VOne block, if you just want to use the set of features of the VOne block, then you just set this parameter to none. Then the Gabor filter bank has also several different implementations. You can set a maximum of spatial frequencies of your Gabors if you want to avoid having very high acuity spatial frequencies. Also, it's important to set one value that respects the Nyquist limit. So I'm going to show an example on how to estimate what should be your spatial frequency max. Spatial frequency means if you want to remove the low pass filters, if you just want to focus all your filters in a certain range of spatial frequencies. And then you can set how many simple channels and how many complex channels the model has. So the models that we've described in the paper, we've used for our main model 512 channels that are equally split between simple and complex. We've done some experiments where we changed this between 64 and even 1024 channels. We didn't see much gains going to more channels. We saw some reduction in accuracy when going to less than 256. So, but again, the more channels we have, the larger the model will be. So you're going to need to balance these things with your other trade-offs that you have in the project. And then the noise layer, if you want your model to be stochastic, there's functionality here. You can then implement different types of neuronal noise. There's the Poisson-like noise as V1, and you can scale it. You can also add a Gaussian type of noise, and you can set all of the parameters of the noise. So there are some options if you want to have a stochastic model. If you don't want a stochasticity, you can use a deterministic model, and you just set the noise mode to none. And then there are other parameters to scale the range of activations and also to constrain the size of the view of the Gabor filter bank kernels. Again, depending on your projects, if you want some help, I can help you. You can ask me how you can try to estimate these parameters. So, okay, so how to use the model. So assuming that you have installed the VOneNet, you open a script or in a notebook, just import the package, and then you just use this function, the get model. And in this case, when you press model arch none, it returns just the V1 block.
Because our experience with computing.
Okay, right, there was some interference, but so if you set these values like this, it just returns a V1 block. And again, this is a model, it's a PyTorch model that is called to process a batch of images. If you want to use a pre-trained VOneNet that contains the V1 block plus the backend architecture, you can just call model, you just assign to the model arch attribute this ResNet 50, and for example, the pre-trained true, and you return already the pre-trained waves of the model. And then to get the activations after the V1 block, or after the whole model, you just call the model by passing as an input a batch of images. Okay, so I will show you how this works. So here I'm importing the model. I'm importing some other packages so that we can pre-process the image and some just to visualize some plots. So here you can see VOneNet get model, model arch. And if you run this, it returns the model. The model is this V1 block that is defined as a torch.nm.module, and inside it contains other submodules that you can also use from our repository. Here I'm just loading a small batch of 16 images from the ImageNet validation size. I'm just doing some typical ImageNet preprocessing. So cropping to 256 pixels and then resizing, resizing to 256 and then cropping to 224. If you run this, you'll see that basically we have a tensor that has 16 images, 3 color channels, and then 224 by 224. If we call the model, you'll now see that after the model, we still have 16 images, but now we have 512 channels and now 56 by 56. So this is, we can just choose an image here on this batch. This is from ImageNet. Okay, let's take this image. And here, as I told you, there are 512 channels. We can here, just for illustrating, we can choose, any 2 channels. So when you run this, you see here the Gabor that was used for these 2 channels, and then the output of the VOne block at that particular level. And you see this is now a 56 by 56 image, and you can now just explore and see how the different kernels give rise to different images. Here I'm just showing 256 of all the 512 kernels so that you have an idea of the variety we have here. And I mentioned earlier the importance of the Nyquist theorem. So as you know, the model, as I said, has a visual degree size of 8 degrees with an image of 224. So if we consider the diagonals where we have lower resolution, we have a maximum frequency of 9.8 cycles per degree. So in our model, we usually use 9 as the maximum spatial frequency. Of course, this changes if, for example, you want to implement the model on CFAR. If you want to implement the model on CFAR, you can, for example, I'm still going to use the ImageNet images, but producing a resolution that is compatible with CFAR. So if we do something like this, now you can see the image at the resolution of CFAR. Okay, let's pick this one. So now if you use the same model, the model was not built to work with such a low resolution. So we need to update the model. So how do we update the model? So, CFAR only has 32 pixels. And since the images are much, much smaller, let's assume that CFAR actually images only cover 2 degrees of visual space. So if we do something like this, we have a maximum spatial frequency of about 5.6 cycles per degree. So we will now generate another model that we now have an image size of 32 degrees, a visual degree of 2, and let's put a spatial frequency maximum of 5. And the stride, let's put at 1 so that we don't downsample the image by a stride of 4. So now we have our new model with these updated parameters. We can now run the model on the activations. Let's keep the same image. And now, so now we see, now we have the kernels appear much larger. They still have the same orientation and spatial frequency, but now they've been updated for the current resolution. And now you have the output of this image at this resolution, and you can change now for other channel numbers, and between 0 and 511, and you see how the image appears after being convolved and passed by the nonlinearity. And so that's, I think that's the most important things to get you started. I included this notebook with the code, and again, basically, you can just you just load the model and then call the model on an image. Now that's going to depend on what your image is and how you do the preprocessing of the image. But I think that you now have the tools so that you can include the VOneNets and particularly the VOne block in your projects for this workshop. And I think there was also, I would just like to thank Joel, co-led this project in developing the VOneNets, and Martin is a very important collaborator, and Franzi and David were also co-authors in the study, and of course all this work was done at the lab of Jim at MIT. And thank you all for listening. So I don't know if you have any questions. I don't know if I'm on time, but I'm here, or you could just contact me on Slack. I can also answer any questions there.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Tiago. We definitely have time for questions. Please go ahead and ask. There's also questions on Slack if nobody asks here.
Yes. Hello. Thank you, Sami. Thank you for your interesting presentation. In fact, I have lots of questions, but
Okay,
it's
that's good.
more related to the scientific aspect of the paper, more like the
Okay.
practical use of the model code, which is pretty straightforward. Can I ask, or do I have to wait Monday?
Oh, yeah. Is it better to wait till Monday, Tiago? Because you will go, I guess, into some detail in the scientific.
I mean, I can answer now. If there are not that many questions, I can answer about the science. But
So yeah, maybe we'll see if anybody has more technical questions, and if not, then I'd be in favor of having Sami ask the scientific questions as well, because on Monday, I assume there will be less time for questions.
I just have one technical question, if I may ask.
Please.
Sure. How exactly do visual degrees from, like, say, an eye correlate to visual degrees in the architecture? Like, I wasn't exactly clear on that.
So an eye can cover, a wide range of visual space. I don't know, maybe something spanning, close to 100 degrees or something like that. But we primates have a fovea, and we do object recognition mostly in the fovea. So, and when we want to, when we see a new scene, we usually parse the scene by performing saccades. And the region of the fovea that has a higher visual acuity, a larger concentration of photoreceptors, we tend to, I mean, there are many definitions, but in our lab, we think that, this behavior of what we call core object recognition, which is identifying quickly an object in the region of the visual space, spans something between 8 to 10 degrees. And so we assigned that the whole field of view, the whole input space of a neural network corresponds to 8 degrees of a scene. When I look at an image, I will identify, the object that is in the central 8 degrees of that scene. I don't know if that was clear.
Yeah, so I guess if you say that the image size is 32 and then you say the visual degrees are 2, that you say that the fovea part, like the central part of vision, is those 2 pixels.
Again,
space wide.
if you present a CFAR image at 8 degrees, the image will look very pixelated, right? So again, CFAR was not built, I guess, with having a very tight relationship with physical spatial degree sizes. But I'm sure that if you present a CFAR image only occupying 2 degrees of the visual space, humans will do it as well as occupying the 8 degrees. So this is kind of an arbitrary. I haven't done those psychophysical experiments, but this was a conversion that I've done here. We in the lab, we use 8 degrees. We work mostly with ImageNet trained models. I was just suggesting if you wanted to, to use this architecture for something like CFAR or NIST, that I wouldn't input CFAR taking 8 degrees, because it's going to be a very low resolution image, and I don't think that it makes much sense.
Okay, clears. Thanks.
I think it's a bit like you're rescaling also all the receptive fields to match the smaller size image, right? Because otherwise,
so the receptive fields are all implemented in physical quantities. That's the thing. Like when I say that we constrain the receptive field properties using neurophysiological data, the receptive field properties were measured in visual degrees. And so that is why when we present an image, we always need to commit, like this image corresponds to 8 degrees, this image corresponds to 4 degrees, because the model, of course, it works on pixels, but it's the math underlying, there's always conversion to degrees, and it always keeps, the same consistency.
yeah, it makes sense. Yes. Okay.
Maybe a follow-up question regarding size of the input images and so on. I found it really impressive that you were able to show this robustness to perturbations and adversarial attacks on ImageNet. But for the scope of our project, we will most likely be dealing with smaller data sets, smaller images. And so I was wondering whether you at any point explored the benefit of VOneNet in terms of robustness to perturbations on smaller data sets, smaller tasks than ImageNet.
So no, we haven't done a very systematic characterization of that.
But would you expect that the benefits still hold in that regime as well?
I would expect, yes. I mean, intuitively, I would expect if it is a better model, if it's a model that is more like processing in the brain, I would expect then the gains would generalize to other data sets. But again, it's not obvious whether that's going to be the case. But again, there are gains in terms of robustness to perturbations, but another gain could be, you have a set of features that works for a visual task, and if you don't want to train, the model on, let's say now for the purpose of if you don't want to train the visual features for the purpose of this closed loop RL agents that the participants will be implementing, you could use immediately, the set of features and not even worrying about training the visual part. Because what we're trying to do here, we're attempting to model the spatial the spatial properties of receptive fields in V1 neurons, and so you would expect those to be able to perform on the task that you are interested here.
Thank you.
I have a technical question. So thank you, Tiago, for your presentation. And can you tell us, like, roughly maybe an estimate how much more training time when you put this block in front of a backbone, let's say ResNet 50? Because it seems to me that now the input channel is usually the input channel would be 3, but now it's 512.
Right, but we eliminate the first convolution. So let's say the first convolution of ResNet, you need to learn a convolution from 3 to 64, but then you have a spatial kernel of 7 by 7 or 5 by 5, and now that is no longer here, and we now just have what we call a bottleneck layer that we just compress this 512 to 64 because that's the output of the first convolution of ResNet. So the model is not, in terms of trainable parameters, is not bigger than the standard ResNet.
Okay.
Because you don't need to learn the first convolution. You just need to learn this first bottleneck. That is just a linear combination of these 512 channels.
Okay, I see. And what are you actually doing in this noise layer? Because I just learned from someone that in PyTorch this sampling might be down on CPU. So I wonder how are things done, like technically here. So
we use that became an important question when evaluating the robustness of the model's adversarial attacks.
That's also a question. Yeah.
Yeah, so this was
implemented on Monday.
Okay, this was implemented using the reparametrization trick. We add so that we can, back propagate the gradients all the way to the images, and we're very confident that we're doing this very correctly, and we're not just masking the gradients. And then on top of that, we do multiple samples. And we did a very large hyperparameter search to try as much as possible to optimize the attacks, so that we're not just seeing just some artifact.
Yeah, okay, but my question is more like in the forward pass, what are you doing?
Yeah, so the forward pass, we're just adding Gaussian noise that has a standard deviation of proportional to the activation. So we're simulating Poisson-like noise using Gaussian noise, and this noise is being added independently to each channel. So you have
56 times 56
times 512. So all of the units receive independent Poisson noise. It's again, yeah, all the units receive independent Poisson noise.
Okay, thank you.
Poisson-like, it's an approximation of Poisson noise, so that it could be fully, differentiable. So it's implemented as a Gaussian noise, but has standard deviation scaled to the mean, to the square root of the mean.
Okay, yeah, cool, thanks.
That's nice because it should be easily translatable to spiking network as well. So good.
Yeah, so we scale the activations of the model so that they match the same number of spikes as neurons in V1 in a time window of 25 milliseconds. But again, you can this can be changed. There's not a direct parameter in the model to do that, but that all goes into the noise parameters, and now we calculate the noise parameters. So the noise parameters are now being calculated as doing an affine transformation from the model activations to actual V1 responses in the 25 time window in terms of spike counts. So if we now have a spiking network, we could just have a different time count, a different time bin, and just have like single events within that time bin. It could, in theory, be also implemented with this model.
Tiago, I'm so sorry. I missed your talk. I had to jump to another meeting. Which parameters are the trainable parameters in V1?
There are no trainable parameters in V1. So all the V1 parameters, they're fixed. They're instantiated to approximate distributions of receptive field properties from V1 neurons.
Okay, I'm a bit confused then, because you said you're using the reparameterization trick to go through the noise layer. So you propagate through V1.
But that's only for the attacks. So when we want to adversarially attack the model, we need to propagate all the way to the input space. It's only for the purpose of the attack. Because for training the model, we don't even need that.
Well, then my next question is, why didn't you train them? Because you don't have to train the kernels there, right? But you can train some other parameters that generate V1. And
we could train. So so since you maybe didn't see the slide,
I'm so sorry.
The parameters of the Gabors, we use neuronal data. So these are we took distributions from recorded V1 neurons to instantiate, the Gabors in our block. So we're not sampling uniform like all spatial frequencies and all orientations. We actually have biases of certain spatial frequencies of certain orientations according to V1, and we chose to not optimize these distributions and just try to approximate to neuronal data. I agree with you. That's an interesting project. It's now okay. We can also optimize all of these parameters contained in the Gabor filter bank. And that's something that I'm interested in. I'm also, I'm working with the student to pursue some of those questions. But this paper has nothing of that sort. We have a fixed V1 that the goal was to attempt to capture, as much as possible all of these described properties of V1 receptive fields.
I suppose what would be interesting then is if you train this to see if you get something that resembles the data in the orange box, but I'm sure that's what you're after.
Right, yeah, that's one of the questions. Again, maybe we will not get exactly the same because this will be, maybe it will depend on what the model is trained on. Maybe for ImageNet, we get some parameters. If we're trying to train the model also to be robust. We get other parameters. If it's for image segmentation, so those are interesting questions.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay, I guess. Yeah,
I see some questions on
Slack.
the Slack. So would freezing the first convolutional layer of a normal ResNet provide the same robustness? No, it does not. We did that analysis. We also added the stochasticity to a fixed layer of the ResNet, and we also don't see this. We see a small improvement of robustness when we add the stochasticity to the ResNet, but not as much. If we consider the Gabor filter bank weights of the first convolution more like an initialization, yes, I think it's like the question that Emery said. Yes, another alternative is we could maybe instantiate using these parameters, but then let the model train. We haven't done that. That's an interesting question. For the common attacks, is the reason that standard models trained on ImageNet have just never seen this kind of perturbations? Well, yes, if you train the model with the perturbations, the model will be good. That's a known result. But one of the goals of computer vision is building models that can generalize for new image distribution, so that you don't need to train in all possible perturbations, and the model can generalize to new ones. And that's, I guess, one of the main goals is to find models that allow this generalization. I guess many of these questions are more scientific and less to do with the implementation of the model, so maybe we can also address them, or people can reach out to me and contact me, and I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Yeah, it might be also useful when the rest of the workshop gets to listen to your talk, and then have the same. They probably have the same questions afterwards. Yeah. So I guess we should just try the toolbox, and then if there are questions, then we put them on Slack, and then Martin and you could help answer or help with yeah. Is that good? Bodo, do you have something else?
Oh, absolutely.
No?
Well, thank you again, Tiago, for taking your time to explain this to us. It's been really useful. And yeah, I'm really excited to get to work on this model. And so the plan for now is to, basically keep going with our work group meeting. Everybody is welcome to stay, but I guess it's mostly concerning those people that are actually doing hands-on work. So I guess we'll take 1 or 2 minutes break and then keep going.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, Tiago.
Thanks, Tiago. I'm going to stop the recording.
Yep, thanks.